Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is just to give a little feedback. Before amalgamation, Osgood Ward, every municipality received some money from the provincial government, and they put a 911 blade on their homes. Osgood Township at that time chose to go with metal blade instead of aluminum. And on main road, especially on main artery, when the snow plows drive by and the snow and salt hit those blades, and they were also installed too close to the road, it create corrosion, and those blades, they've been rusted. This case create a public safety, and it give a hard time for our 911 respond people to be able to identify the home. So the city and us, we're working with creating a program for 1 year for Osgood Ward resident to be able to come and change their blade. So these, we need to receive this and we can defer it else to work with staff to create some rule and some policy around it. So.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Roos, for that, and appreciate you working with staff on that. Sorry, Eli, Councillor Oster-Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And reading this report, it says there is no financial implication. So where this report go from here? It go to FEDCO, or goes to, or you're going to deal with it on budget time?
Yeah, we're going to deal with it on budget time.
Okay. And can we go on record, like, you know, the rest of the township, they use aluminum, they were smart enough, they didn't use metal blades, so that's why they're still good?
I have to agree with you.
Thank you.
One more way, Dr. Thompson.
Yes, so let the record show that Osgood Township screwed up, and it was solely Osgood Township that made this mistake.
Also, I've been cleaning lots of more items, but that's one of them, so thank you very much.
So Councillor just wants to clarify that there's a lot more Osgood screw-ups than just this one that he's been dealing with. So it's good that we put that on the record, that Cumberland, Rideau, Goulburn, and West Carleton townships did not make such similar mistakes that Osgood made. I don't know who the last mayor of Osgood was, but all right. So on that inquiry, is that received?
Received.
Thank you. The next item deals with the Kizel municipal drain. We're actually going to, because the engineer cannot be here today. Unfortunately, it was an emergency situation. He cannot make it here today. We're going to refer that. Back to staff, and they're going to come back with it on November 24th, the November 24th meeting of Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee. So on referral. Carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is the appointment of an engineer for Flowing Creek Municipal Drain, that the Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council appoint Mr. Andy Robinson of Robinson Consultants as the engineer of record to prepare a report that addresses the implications of a proposed subdivision being connected to the existing Flowing Creek Municipal Drain, Phase 1 under subsection 65.1 and 65.5 of the Drainage Act as described in this report. This is a drain that runs into Richmond, and the development is a Cardell development on Shea Road, just right in the inside the village boundary. So on the appointment of the engineer. Carried. Item number 4 is a zoning bylaw amendment for part of 2548 8th Line Road in Osgood Township. That Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee recommend Council approve an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for part of 2548 8th Line Road to permit residential uses as shown in document 1 and detailed in document 2. And the second component, of course, is the public consultation section of this report also be approved. On that item? Carried. Thank you. And item number 5 and 6. Item number 5 deals with coach houses, and item number 6 is sort of a complimentary report that speaks to heights for accessory buildings. We're going to hold those items and take, I know we have some speakers, and we're going to get a presentation first from Ali Magalhaes and Michelle Kearney. Michelle's here to answer questions if need be, but I think Alain's going to run that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. My name is Alain Magalhaes. I am going to present to you today the official plan and zoning package for secondary dwelling units in accessory buildings, also known as coach houses. With me is Mr. Michelle Kearney, who is in the infrastructure planning branch, and he's a project manager, also a hydrogeologist by trade. Mr. Chairman and members of committee, a bit of background. The package that we're presenting to you today comes from provincial direction through changes to the Planning Act that directed municipalities to permit the creation of a second dwelling unit in houses, not just as a basement apartment, but also as a separate building. So the notion which is being introduced in Ontario is not new in Canada. It's something that we see especially in the West Coast, around the Vancouver area, Victoria, Calgary and Edmonton have dabbled with it. Ottawa is the first city in Ontario to jump into this. We are ahead of Toronto, London, Kitchener, Hamilton. The only other municipality in Ontario that has done this is the township of Innisfil, as far as we know. But we're the first municipality, and we're also unique in that we have, as we know, through the amalgamation, the rural, the suburban, and the urban context. And our challenge was to get it right for each of those three. Our zoning already allows second units in a main dwelling, so apartments in houses, basement apartments as they've been called. The zoning we're introducing today would allow a second unit in an accessory building. We've called them coach houses. In Vancouver, they're called laneway houses, and other cities have other names for them, but here we call them coach houses. And the goal through the provincial direction is to provide opportunities for gentle intensification and also to open housing options for people who are looking for locations that are close to family within the same property in case of extended family or aging parents or aging teenagers wanting to live independently. So in a nutshell, the coach house zoning package and official plan changes that we're presenting today would allow coach houses in association with detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings, and in some cases townhouses, all across the city, including the rural area, except in Rockcliffe Park. It would permit a coach house or a secondary dwelling unit, but not both, and that's consistent with the Planning Act direction. It provides for coach houses to stay as accessory to the main house, so they can't be severed, and they must be located in the rear yard. The idea is creating a little house in a backyard, so it's clearly subsidiary to, smaller than, and accessory to the main house. And in order to achieve that, the zoning introduces limits to the footprint of the coach house. It's limited to 40% of the main dwelling's footprint, or 40% of the yard, whichever is less. And then there's an upper limit on the size of the coach house, 80 square meters in the urban, and for the rural, 95 square meters. And in order to deal with issues of privacy, there's setback requirements and direction on where you can put windows and face doors. There's differences between the rules and zoning that we are proposing between the urban and the rural area, and I'll focus on the rural area. When we started this, originally we had only focused the zoning on the urban, but through consultation we realized that there is a strong interest in the rural area to also avail themselves of this opportunity. So realizing that one size does not fit all, and I realize, Mr. Chairman, the screen is a little off kilter here. I'm not sure how to fix that, but that's the projector we're working with. Yeah. The French version, though, looks just dandy. Anyways, in the rural area, we are providing for the opportunity to introduce coach houses in situations of private servicing and in situations of communal servicing. There are minimum lot size requirements for situations of private services. Yeah, that looks better. Yeah, thanks. And in situations of private services, we are making it a requirement to have site plan control. It is the site plan control light for rural applications that is applied in this case, and it allows the city to require a hydrogeological assessment in order to determine the suitability of private services. In terms of maximum height in the rural area, they can go up to 6.1 meters, so 2 stories as of right. And if you're doing a 1-story coach house, the limit would be 4.0 meters, as proposed in our report, which is, about the size of a large shed or a garage. So in front of you, Mr. Chairman, are changes to the official plan. We have to update our official plan policies to permit coach houses. We have to introduce criteria for consideration of minor variances. We have also changes that are not in front of AIRAC, but for information of committee, to the development charges bylaw and to the site plan control bylaw, as well as to the parkland dedication bylaw. We want coach houses to be an affordable option. Therefore, we're exempting coach houses from parkland dedication or cash in lieu of park. We are exempting coach houses from site plan control except when they're on private well and septic. And in terms of development charges, we are only applying the public transit component of development charges to coach houses, which will make it a lot cheaper and affordable to develop them. So here's an illustration of what this might look like in a rural setting. Typically, lot sizes are larger. We still have setbacks from lot lines as they apply to any other building. But basically you're talking about having an accessory building with a dwelling in it. It could have a garage. It could be up to 2 stories. And it would be positioned on the property in a way as to make sure that we avoid the footprint of an existing septic system, and in situations of smaller lots that are within a certain distance of the property line. In situations of larger lots, that's less of an issue in the rural area. So that's the general overview, Mr. Chairman. Michelle and I are here for questions if there are any from committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to get clarity on a couple things. Can you just go back to the page where it says the changes that are required for the things that are the steps? Yeah. So before we go to public delegations, I just want to ask 2 questions, and I want to introduce 3 motions that we have before us. One question is the site plan control. Can you just explain what that process is when it comes to those on well and septic, and what the cost would be for that site plan control, and what the rationale is behind why for well and septic and not if otherwise?
Right. So the site plan control is an application that is needed in cases where people wish to develop a coach house on properties that have private servicing, and it's, I think, a $684 application fee. That money pays for city staff to review a hydrogeological report that's produced and that would confirm the issues that need to be looked at in terms of private servicing to make sure that the coach house can be supported in accordance to safety measures for water and wastewater.
Right. And the hydrogeological study, that is a study specific to well and septic capacity as they relate to coach houses?
Yes, that's correct.
No, just hold the button down. Just use it. Use Alliance. They're portable.
Good morning. I guess it's working.
Yes, thanks.
Yes, it has to do with the capacity, but also with the, I just want to add that it's also related to the impact. So a sewage system will discharge a certain level of contamination that has certain levels that are acceptable. So it's to ensure that there's enough room for the septic and that the well has the capacity, but also that the well water is of sufficient quality, and also that the impact is not undue onto the aquifer.
What do you have? I don't know. I'm not familiar with it. Do you have a rough estimate of what the cost of that specific hydrogeological study would be?
I don't have that exactly, but it would certainly be over $1,000 for sure.
Okay.
But it'll depend, I think, on the extent of the study.
Right. But you don't need to go much further than just studying the septic and well capacity and the impacts of the increased volume within the septic system. Correct.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just before we get to delegations, I think we have two delegations. I have 2 motions here. Councillor DeRuse is going to move them, and they are with relation to height, the permitted building heights for accessory buildings, which is item number 6 on the agenda, as well as secondary dwelling units in accessory buildings. The mention there, which also refers to heights. So and there's a motion from Councillor Chantiri too. So I'll just read the two from Councillor DeRuse that we have here. Therefore, be it resolved that the following changes be made to staff report. Amend document 2 by deleting item 87A in the details of the recommended zoning and replacing it with the following. The maximum permitted height of a building containing a coach house in the AG, EP, ME, MR, RC, RG, RH, RI, RR, RU, V1, V2, V3, and VM zones is the lesser of the height of the principal dwelling, or 4.5 meters, despite where the living area of the coach house is entirely located on the second story above a detached garage. The coach house may have a maximum height of 6.1 meters. The report before us recommends 3.6 meters.
Mr. Chairman, the report recommended 4 meters in the rural area, so just by way of explanation, when we undertook the coach houses study, we had overwhelming amounts of comments back from the urban area and the suburban area to also reduce the size, the permitted height of accessory buildings like sheds. And the situation there was you have that 4.5 meter permission right now, which is in denser urban neighborhoods. It's pretty high. And your as of right permission is to build 4.5 meters. And we wanted to avoid the situation where you can build a shed 4.5 meters, then come in, get a permit, and convert it to a coach house. So we needed those two things to match. In the rural area, it was only later that we realized that people were not actually experiencing that difficulty. And so the motion that is in front of committee is to just leave the height as it is at 4.5 for a single story.
Right, because the comments that we were hearing related to building heights were strictly related to the urban and suburban areas, and we did not receive those same comments in the rural area. So we want to make sure the report that gets approved reflects the difference in those two environments, and that we aren't changing any of the standards in the rural area. The only change will be in the suburban area, reflecting the comments that were heard during the process. Correct?
That's right.
Perfect. And the other motion, which is again complementary because the permitted building heights for accessory buildings is the one that came through this as well, to make sure that those two were aligned. And that one says, therefore, be it resolved that the following change be made to staff report. Amend document 1 by deleting item 1 in the details of recommended zoning and replacing it with the following. Amend table 55, column 2, row 5 by deleting the words 4.5 meters and replacing them with the words R1, R2, R3, R4, and R5, 3.6 meters, with the height of the exterior walls not to exceed 3.2 meters in height. And then V1, V2, and V3 zones would be 4.5 meters. And be further resolved that no further notice pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act. So those two are before us. We'll deal with those toward the end of this item. And Councillor Ashton, sorry?
Mr. Chairman, you'll notice in that second motion that the VM zone is missing.
Oh, yes.
And that's because in the VM zone, the permitted height is 6 meters.
Okay.
So we're not touching that.
Right, fair enough. Perfect. The next motion is from Councillor Shantiri, and it deals with lot sizes.
Well, basically, Mr. Chair, it's been recommended to be on 2-acre lots. So the motion here, therefore, be it resolved, the following changes be made to staff's report. Amend document 1 by deleting under Part B the amendment item and replacing it with the following. A lot that is 0.4 hectare or greater in size is located in a rural area or village anywhere. The primary dwelling is served by the private water and wastewater system, and the coach houses should be shared either the water or the wastewater system with the main dwelling. And the primary dwelling is served by one public or communal service, water or wastewater, and one private service on the coach houses will be shared. So basically, instead of having it just for the 2-acre lot, if we can have just for 1-acre lot. And I have one question to staff, and I'd like you to clarify it before we start public delegation. In the rural area, the second dwelling is allowed. The secondary dwelling are permitted, and you mentioned it as well in your presentation. But then we don't have any restriction on them. But yet here we're putting all these. So instead, if I have a house in a rural area, why would I want to go for coach house? I can just go for the secondary dwelling because that's permitted. So can you...
Mr. Chairman, in the mandate that we had to work on coach houses, we didn't have the mandate to touch the existing rules with apartments and regulations, and I can pass them to Mr. Kearney. But my understanding is that if we were to redo the rules for apartments and houses from scratch today, we
Again, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to explain to the public and to all of us here. Rural area allowed a second dwelling. What's the difference with the secondary dwelling and the coach house?
Again, I was not involved with the, as Anne was saying, with the original sort of allowance of a secondary dwelling inside the primary house. What I was asked to do on this file is to look at the technical aspects of coach houses, which is a secondary or separate dwelling altogether. Mm-hmm. So we want to ensure that people are safe in the long term, that the water is of sufficient quality, and that we're not impacting the environment to a point where it's going to be an issue if a number of coach houses in one area go in, particularly the contaminant that you've heard a lot about, I'm sure, in the rural area is nitrate. It's one of the contaminants. There are more contaminants, but that is the sort of an indicator contaminant because it lives a long time in the environment and travels long distances. So just to put it in simple terms, the nitrates will go up, and that's sort of the minimum lot size is in keeping with the official plan policy that came in with official plan OPA 150. Where minimum lot sizes of 0.4 were stipulated, and that was actually upheld by a fairly recent Ontario Municipal Board hearing. So this, the minimum lot size for severances of 0.4 and for subdivisions of 0.4 is related to this in the sense that we're not creating new lots here, existing lots of record, but we are adding a dwelling unit. So the effect on the environment, the effect on the groundwater, is basically the same if you add a dwelling unit than if you look at a severance. So we're being consistent with the fairly recent addition to the official plan of a minimum lot size of 0.4, which was based on impact considerations.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we'll wait to hear from the delegate, and we'll come back to our discussion with this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Our first speaker on this item is Klaus Beltzner. That's good. You had it on? Yeah, you had it on. So just press it again. Just hold it. Now it's on. Oh, now it's off again.
Look at the top of the light.
Just wait for me to tell you. Now you're good.
There it is.
Just don't touch it again.
I was looking at the wrong place.
Stop touching it.
Thank you very much. My name is Klaus Beltzner. Thank you, Councillor Moffat, and thank you, staff, for your presentation. Councillor Eli El-Chantiri raised a very important point. Secondary dwellings are permitted at this time without any requirement for any studies, without any requirement for size of lot. Existing lot is the standard. So here we have the only situation that's different is that the dwelling is apart from the main dwelling. So it's an external secondary dwelling as opposed to an internal secondary dwelling. And there are two rather onerous conditions. One is the 0.8 hectares as recommended by staff, as well as a site plan control. I understand the need to keep people safe and the issue with the septic and the well, that I understand, and we have the site plan control proposal to deal with that, which means we don't really need any other control in terms of size of lot pertaining to well and septic. So we have a belt and suspenders approach to the rural areas, and specifically to villages where the lot sizes are not 2 acres. And if you say, well, most of the rural villages are on city services or communal service, that is wrong. Most of the villages are on private services. Have a look at Osgood Village. You show me where there are city services. In fact, it's city policy not to permit city services outside the urban boundary with certain small exceptions. So we have a conflict of policies here that need to be resolved. I think the emphasis on keeping people safe and safe drinking water and not overloading the ground with large septic systems that can't be dissipated is correct. So we have the hydrological studies. I think that can stay, but not with respect to the size of the lots. If you have an existing lot that is permitted to have an internal secondary dwelling without anything else to be done, then you should consider what that impact is with respect to the coach houses. Why do you differentiate on that basis? So that's a particular policy conflict that you have in front of you. The other thing is why, again, why these onerous restrictions to almost essentially prevent most properties in rural villages to even have consideration for an external coach house or for an external dwelling called a coach house. I think that's wrong. If you're going to have the argument that the provincial policy is to allow affordable housing and for families to have their elderly members live independently next to your own house, you should also allow that in rural villages as you do in urban Ottawa. So it's an unfairness component. And the lot sizes you cannot change. You cannot grow a lot size in a village. So I urge you to consider removing the issue of a lot size if you're going to impose a site plan control. You don't need both for that particular purpose. I thank Councillor Moffat for the motion on removing the restrictions, the new restrictions proposed by staff on the height of ancillary buildings. To bring it back to, or to leave it as it is, I guess that's the best way of saying it. I think that's the right way of doing it. There were no complaints from the rural areas with respect to the ancillary units height. So I think that's the right approach for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belzer. Just to be fair to staff, their role was not to marry coach houses with secondary dwelling units. It's something that we've sort of latched onto. I think residents have latched onto as a clear comparator, but it was not staff's direction to take secondary dwelling units and create coach houses. So they did come up with a different policy. If we want to change that, we can change that, but that's just that's what they've done. The other thing is they aren't necessarily prohibited. So if you own a half-acre lot in a village, they aren't prohibited. But there would be an additional process, and Alain made reference to that through committee of adjustments. A minor variance would be required if you wanted to do it in an undersized lot. That's just, like I said, that doesn't mean that we might not make further changes to that, but it's not prohibited. All right. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate that. And our second speaker on the item is Shirley Dolan. That's good. Thank you for coming, Shirley. You have 5 minutes.
Is it on?
Funny how people from West Carleton, they got it first time.
Thank you, Eli.
Just to be clear, while I deal with Mr. Beltzner quite often, he lives in Osgood Ward. So I just wanted to make sure there's a clear distinction there.
I'd like to thank Council for their motions and their comments on the coach houses proposal, and also staff for their presentation. I believe that the proposal by the province and the city following up on affordable housing is one of the most important land planning propositions that has come down. This is a very important option for rural areas. In West Carleton, I know that we do have an issue with affordable housing for seniors, and we're desperate for solutions for that. And so I do take exception to having additional costs in the rural areas, because it means that with one hand we're proposing something, but with the other hand we're taking it back. I do appreciate the clarification of what site plan control and hydro-G study will mean. This is not spelled out in the documentation or in the official plan or in the zoning, and it does lead to a lot of concern on the part of rural residents that they're going to have to pay upwards of $10,000 to $20,000 to have a coach house. And I found that disturbing. I think we need to be clear when we're putting these proposals forward on what it is we mean. I don't understand why we need the application fee for staff to review a hydro-G study. Isn't that their job to do that? Is this an additional burden that we're putting on staff, or they're putting on themselves, perhaps? I do appreciate the need to acknowledge health and safety. I want to be perfectly clear that I do understand that, and I do appreciate it, and I do support it. Having said that, I believe that staff could work with companies who do specialize in this type of thing to come up with some type of plan to ensure that the capacity is there and the nitrates are not a problem. If those are the issues, number one, when I have my well drilled or when I have my septic installed, the septic, I believe, is registered with, is it the Conservation Authority? Yeah. So, I mean, we do have information regarding the capacity of our septics and also our wells as well, too, which I think are registered with MOECC. So I just recently had a well drilled and I got all that information. So that information is available and should not change over the life of those services. There are tests for nitrates. The homeowner could have that done at a very inexpensive cost, I believe. So I would suggest or recommend that staff look at other options like that rather than insisting on the site plan control and the hydro-G study. When you say hydro-G study, to me, it means big dollars. Michael did refer to the fact that he thought that it would be more than $1,000, but we don't know how much it is. So I guess what I'm saying is I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the rural wards for affordable housing. I think it's a very positive step, one that we haven't taken in a long time for the rural areas. And I wouldn't want to see people deterred from having these because they're afraid. I just want to say one thing, I'm sorry. In here it says that you cannot appeal the official plan or the zoning bylaw once it's approved. I don't know why. Thanks.
I don't know why. Is there a... Yeah, Christine. Is that a question? Yeah, sorry, yeah. Why does the report say that it can't be appealed?
So the provisions under the Planning Act do not allow appeals on secondary dwellings are exempt. And so the policy basis is to promote secondary dwellings And so the official plan exempts them from appeal unless we are undertaking a comprehensive zoning bylaw review, which would then open up the entire zoning bylaw from the city. So it's a planning act. It's a planning act control that really has nothing to do with the city.
Okay. So if during an official plan review, then a coach house bylaw could actually be appealed at that time, but not
During a comprehensive review,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. All right. Thank you. Any questions for the delegation, Councillor El-Shantiri?
Thank you, Shirley, for first of all for your correspondence to us and showing up today here. And I agree with everything you said about try to make it easy, affordable. This is where the province actually's direction is, and where I'm having a little bit of struggling here to understand. We need to make sure everything's safe, and but I fail to understand within the same policy, one would allow secondary dwelling without any of those conditions, and one will add most of that with the coach houses. So I'm trying to understand. So that means we can just say, and I'm not sure if you agree with that or not, forget about coach house, just go do second dwelling then. And is that something, like, I mean, I like the idea of to have some checks and balance, and I think Klaus and I were talking earlier how important it is to make sure potable water away from sewer, if it's a nitrate. This is something we're all concerned about and want to make sure we get it right. But I don't understand, we have so many restrictions on one, and the other one can easily be without restriction. What's your thought about that?
My thought is I really like the idea of the coach houses. I think people will decide for themselves if they have two choices and one is less onerous than the other one. But I would hope that they would not be put in that position because, as you well know, Councillor El-Shantiri, living in a rural area, people are very independent there. They enjoy their independence even as they age, like me. And a secondary dwelling, I think, would allow them to continue that independence, yet have maybe their children or maybe somebody else close by for safety. Just a comment on the health and safety. I think generally what the City of Ottawa would be better off doing is coming up with a program that would allow people to ensure that their systems are safe. And that's not to say that they're not doing that. I believe they do that. And I am uncomfortable when I perceive that the city is suggesting, and I'm not saying they're suggesting that, but it's the way that I read it, that private systems are less safe than communal and public systems. I don't believe they are. I did have the opportunity to speak to some people that deal with septics and with well, and they've assured me that through, non-expensive tests, we can make sure that there are no nitrates there. Further to your point, Councillor, about the difference between secondary dwelling inside and outside of the house, I might be a couple with children, and as we all know, children often come home and they bring their children. So that means that you're putting additional load on those private systems. So it happens, but it should be up to the landowner, the property owner, to understand what the capacity is of their systems, and they should have the opportunity to ensure that those systems are safe. And what we should be doing is, if there is a concern about nitrates, then having some opportunity for the homeowner to have that tested without the city having to review whether you did it properly or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Dolan.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
We have a third speaker that registered, Heather Pearl, with the Federation of Citizens Associations. I know you sent in something, at least to me, just this morning regarding this, and I believe you'll be speaking at Planning Committee next week when it comes to there. But thank you for coming, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Actually, let me first say that we think that the coach houses might, in its current form, be fine for the rural area, but that should be decided by the rural area in full consultation with them. Having the coach house bylaw apply all over the city, though, is a real problem for us because we are really keen on preserving the environment within the urban area. As you know, cities are heat sinks, and they are, well, the bad air and the bad water and stuff, it doesn't stay in the city, it goes everywhere. So therefore, we're very concerned. We would like to have this completely separated so that they could be dealt with appropriately for each different section, and we don't think it's quite there yet for the urban area. We note that British Columbia put in a coach house bylaw. They took 3 years to do it. They consulted widely. They ended up putting coach houses on rear lanes only. And they also have in place legislation to protect homeowners on abutting properties. Our concern is that in the urban area, we've already lost a tremendous amount of green space to in some cases, overdevelopment. And it's not an opposed to development. We really like it when neighborhoods grow and change. But when you cut down 100-year-old trees to put in a $1 million semi, you are not creating any home for people who actually might need to have a home. You're creating houses for rich people. And this is what's happening. And now, after several years, we've worked on the zoning bylaw. We were able to achieve some changes that would allow increased space in rear yards for trees, for water infiltration to help mitigate that heat loading and to help actually prevent some of the stormwater runoff which is happening and which is polluting the rivers. And so we find that when you have a bylaw which allows coach houses everywhere, you will end up killing the trees on the neighbor's property because tree roots do not stay in one place. We see that there will be less room for water infiltration, and we're very concerned about use. I know that you can't legislate that they're not going to be Airbnb or something like that, but I know in my community we do have elderly people living in homes. We have people, several generations living in homes in my community. We're already doing the things that this is supposed to help, and I don't think it's going to help us. It's going to destroy our environment. And we would really appreciate it if the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee would ask staff to provide copies of the legislation and regulations that will prevent property owners from severing a lot in Ottawa, which contains both a principal residence and a coach house, because British Columbia does have that. So.
All right, thank you. Just to clarify, this is a report that, as you know, goes to 2 committees.
Yes.
The terms of reference for both committees are quite clear as to what we deal with. The last thing I want is Planning Committee telling this committee what to do in the rural area.
Yes.
We won't take the position at Agriculture Rural Affairs Committee to tell Planning Committee what to do. I think your comments are mostly related to what the Planning Committee would be looking at next week.
Yes.
And they are best positioned there. So we won't really be responding to the comments that you've made today.
Okay, and this was largely an information item for you.
Sure, and I appreciate
to let you know that we have issues with a one-size-fits-all zoning bylaw to inform you.
Yeah, certainly we're taking that approach as well. We're focusing on the portion that affects the rural area and how we can make that better.
Good.
So that's, and then planning committee, of course, will deal with that. It'll all come together at council in 3 weeks' time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So just in response to some of the questions asked by the first two delegations, I did want to comment on the fees, why fees are sometimes necessary. The planning department isn't exactly funded out of taxes. It's more of a user fee. Staff are paid out of user fees, I guess is the best way to say it. I mean, our taxes, you don't want our taxes in the rural area going toward analyzing a 45-story building on Preston Street. The staff that review that file are paid for out of the fees for that file. So that's why the system is made that way. It's that, you know, if you're doing something on your property and you want to make a change, your neighbor isn't paying their taxes towards your change. You're paying for the service you're getting. I realize that sometimes different municipalities have different fees, and that can be challenging in explaining that. But really, it is a user pay system, so our taxes don't go toward other people's projects. You're paying for the project that you're doing on your property. Just to touch more on, I think what would be good to get for this committee would be a clear distinction. If you could provide us with a clear distinction in the next week or so, or 2 weeks or whatever. I mean, we have 3 weeks before this goes to council, on what are the exact differences between a secondary dwelling unit that is allowed today and a coach house. And we can review that and make possible changes. I think it might be best to withdraw the motion for now on the change from 2 acre to 1 acre to see if we want to make further revisions to that motion. Councillor Chair, would you agree with that?
So, yes, I would, Mr. Chair.
So then maybe we can look at that and we can sort of refine that, working with staff and councillors. I know Councillor DeRuse and Councillor Shantiri have been quite involved in this with myself in the past few weeks. So maybe we can get that, so provide direction to you, Michelle, if you could give us that clear distinction between those two. And then maybe we can talk about that more. Councillor DeRuse?
Also, if we can, what we like to see, it's exactly what the chair is asking. We like to see a clear vision in both processes. If you're applying for second dwelling or you're applying for a coach house, from A to B, and is not estimate for us also how much is going to cost the resident if they're going to do a geology study or they're going to put an application. We like to see this in detail for both. And I also understand what we did is with the coach houses is to basically help our resident not to put more emphasis on red tape. And the other idea is, are we going to try to avoid to go to, the whole idea is not to go to get a variance and go to committee of adjustment and all that. So I like to see the processes in both steps, and we'd like to see also the cost on both steps and making sure we have a clear vision before we make our decision. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for staff?
No, I just want to, we'd like to thank staff and everyone's been working on this file. I know, Mr. Chair, yourself and the staff and the senior staff have been working on this, and Alain and Mike, thank you very much for doing all this. But this is very important for us. When we are implementing new policies, we need to make sure, we need to look at it from outside the box, making sure we're not creating another problem. Because basically, what we're trying to do here to make we have issues in our rural area, and we do not have sufficient senior housing and whatnot we have in the city and the urban area. So to us is very important, and defining the difference between coach and second dwelling, it's really important for our residents. So we really thank you for taking the time, explaining to us in black and white what's the steps in both processes, and to be able to answer to our residents. So thank you for all the work. We understand lots of resources have been put behind. I know we're almost there, but we're just to making sure before we make our decision we have the right processes in place. Thank you.
Thank you. And just one further thing, on our planning, on our website, we have clear distinction between what the costs are for different things. I think when we, if this is approved as presented or minor changes, but if we go forward with the site plan and Hydro G portion, I think it would be wise on the coach house section of our website when we get to that point that we define exactly what the process is and what the costs are, what the associated costs are, so that someone like Shirley doesn't have that fear that it's going to be something bigger than what it is, that we lay out, this is a specific cost for that study. Because yes, site plan can be quite a different thing for different processes, and the costs are quite different. So we want to make sure that we're clear on that so someone doesn't get caught off guard and also doesn't get sort of scared away from going forward with that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, absolutely, and I think the delegation was quite eloquent in highlighting how much information is actually needed. What was not in front of you in today's package but will be ready and that staff has been working on is a booklet on how to. And that contains all the explanation, all the details, all the step-by-step of the process, because we realized when we were putting this together, and it is not a one-size-fit-all, we were very sensitive to each and every context, and the rural context in particular has its own characteristics. For instance, we know that it's an expensive proposition to build something new, but we've got provisions to allow people to convert an existing building into a coach house. You can convert a shed into a coach house. There is a process through which you do that, and when you start to break it down, it is actually quite more detailed and complex. It's feasible, and we just need to make sure that the information is put into the hands of people interested in doing this. So rest assured, Mr. Chairman, that does exist, and as soon as council makes a determination, that will be available to the public.
All right, thank you. So I think we're comfortable to bring these forward today, carry these today, but between now and council, we will work on that lot size thing. Either we'll bring forward the 1 acre minimum back at council in 3 weeks' time, or we'll revise that to something else. But we'll work on that in the next couple weeks. So on the two amendments from Councillor DeRusse, we'll do on the amendments item 5 with regard to heights of accessory buildings, coach houses. Carried. And with the amendment to item number 6, which is the permitted building heights for accessory buildings, again, on the heights. Carried. I'll just go back to the... Sorry, just bear with me so I can read the proper thing, so I don't approve the wrong thing. So on item number 5, it's that the Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend the council approve amendments to official plan as detailed in document 1, recommend the council approve amendments to the zoning bylaws detailed in document 2, recommend the council repeal the policy changes to section 2.5.2 policy 10 and section 3.1 policy 1 as proposed in items 107 and 130 official plan amendment number 150, and repeal the policy changes to section 3.1 policy 1 proposed in item E of plan amendment number 140 as they apply to secondary dwelling units, and 2, approve the public consultation section of this report. So on that report as amended, carried. And on item number 6, that the Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend council approve the amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for V1, V2, and V3 village residential zones in the rural area as set out in document 1, and that we approve the public consultation section of this report. On that report as amended, carried. All right, thank you very much. There is no in-camera items. For the open mic session, we do have 2, and they've already spoken at this committee before already today. Claire Speltzner. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Elaine.
That's absolutely correct. Thank you, Councillor Moffat.
You have 33 seconds.
33 seconds. Yes, the Osgood 911 blades. Some of our blades have rusted to the point that nobody can actually read them. So my immediate neighbors and myself, we've gone ahead and we've paid our $30 to get new aluminum blades And I thank very much Councillor DeRuse for his initiative to make sure that all of our other neighbours are able to get those blades next year. So I'm going to talk about the process. We have service centres in the rural wards. There's one in Metcalfe and there's one in North Gower, where we typically get our packages when we do the fall and spring cleanups. So I see no reason why we can't have the blades shipped to those client service centres in the rural area without requiring us to go down to 175 Loretta Avenue. And in fact, the staff response to an inquiry actually recommended that particular streamlined process. So I'm asking that this process be implemented as of right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Klaus, for coming out. And now you're having difficulty sharing this mic. We need to change the system anyway. Mr. Chair, will I be able to have an inquiry maybe to see direct staff on looking into changing the process and what's the implication on the financial, or see if there is a way we can get those blades delivered to the client service center if the residents choose to, and if there is a way they can maybe put the application, they can choose to pick up or delivery or something. Can we do that? It's have a direction for staff?
Right, so this is something that we probably should have done when we dealt with the item a few minutes ago. But I'd recommend just working with...
It's different
well, it's the same. It's the same.
But this is for the existing process.
I see. For the...
So there is two different items here. The 911 blade that the initiative we're doing, it's different.
Yeah.
But this is for right now. If any person in West Carleton or in Osgood or Rideau Colburn, they want to get a blade, they have to go to Loretta Street to pick it up. So the inquiry is to see, moving forward, we can have a choice to be delivered to the client service center.
Sure, if you want to put that inquiry in, I think you'd want a response from staff before you figured out what that is, because, again, I don't need a new blade. And if my blade's going to go up in cost because we're not delivering them out, I don't really care for that. So we need to know what the actual implications on the costs are going to be, because they're not going to deliver them out for free.
That's exactly what we're looking for.
All right. That's fine. So submit that inquiry to Mark, and that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Shirley Dolan to speak about, is this an issue right now? Stormwater rates in the rural area?
This is a comment, of course, because this is a comment because I know that that issue is not coming to ARAC. I think I had suggested at some of the public meetings that it should come to ARAC, simply because I think, again, we're dealing with a difference between urban, suburban, and rural. I will also be at the Environment Committee, and I know you sit on that committee as well, too. So I'll make more comments there, but I just, after having gone to, I think, 5 or 6 of the meetings, I was a bit disappointed to see the result, where we're still having a separate levy in the rural areas. I really do think that the stormwater in the rural areas is more about culverts, roads, and ditches, which to me is a roads issue. So that's really the comment that I wanted to make, and I will make a more formal presentation at the Environment Committee. Also, I've asked the city to provide a description or a definition of agricultural land and particularly forested land, because those two are to be exempt, and there isn't a definition in the documentation that I received. At least I couldn't find it anyways. That was all.
All right, thank you. Yes, so I do sit on Environment Committee. The Environment Committee for October 18th is not going to be in Champlain Room. It's going to be moved to Council Chambers, so that there's more space. There's more space for councillors. I know that my colleagues here, my rural colleagues, will likely be at that committee all day, so we'll get all of us there, regardless. I didn't even need to deal with it twice because I sit on both committees, but they'll be there. They'll be there. Also, in response to that one portion about it should be with the roads. It was, as you know, it was with the roads. That's where it originally existed. It was within that roads budget. That department still implements those works. It's still the Public Works Department that's grading your road and plowing your road, that's going out there and doing the ditches and replacing the culverts. It's still that same group. The one thing that changed was the funding mechanism. The challenge with putting it back together is that you have to find a hole in which to put it without impacting something else. And that's where this is something we tried. We heard that at the public consultations. It's something that I had spoken to residents about, but wanting to actually achieve that. But for the rural area, the balance that's paying into it is $2 million charge. We had to find a $2 million gap in there, and as much as we tried, we couldn't fit it in there without impacting the tax rate. If you impact the tax rate, you impact everyone's tax rate, so it's not just the actual people you're focusing on. So it is something that we did look at, we did try, and it wasn't a perfect fit as to how to get that money in there. But ultimately, it is still that same department. It's just where the money comes from. That makes the difference, if that makes sense to you.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. It means, I guess it means kind of a, I understand you're saying that, yes, it will mean that the taxes will go up for everybody, not just the rural.
That's right.
But there is rural roads budget item, I'm sure, a line item for that.
There is.
For many, and so I'm not sure why.
Yep. Councillor Shantiri?
Thank you. And one of the areas, surely, we heard from our residents as well, because you and I were in the same meeting, to suggest just take it from the rural road budget. Well, I can tell you the rural road budget is barely exist anymore. And we're struggling every budget to increase more for the rural roads resurface. Because, I mean, now we start to see increase for the next 4 years to that budget, like the overlay, resurfacing, graveling, and all that. But to suggest take money out of it or to take $2 million, so that means we're going to have less road work done in our area. And that is a challenge for us, even with the existing budget, which is going to be increased this year more than last year. It's still not enough. And I know your colleague shaking his head, agreeing with me in the back. But when you ask about the forestry and the agriculture, I asked the same question. And forestry is dependent on impact. If impact recognize your property as a forestry, so that means you are exempt from the stormwater. If the 100-acre agriculture is 100 acre, you are exempt. But if you have a dwelling on 100 acres, so that means the dwelling will be charged the stormwater, but not the 100 acres. So I'm not, but that's, I clarified that from staff, because that was, if you remember, Mr. Gregory was front page story, and when I explained that to him, he was more than happy to hear, oh yeah, now it makes sense. So anyway, I just want to put it on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Shirley, for coming out. And we've heard you through the public consultation time and time again. We do have a challenge on how do we need to implement that, but also we heard it lots from our residents. I want to echo what Councillor Shantiri said. We cannot afford to take more money from our road to do different infrastructure. If we do that, that means less paving, and our road already deteriorated. Also, if we add it to the tax base, that means we cannot exempt the farmer, and that's where our biggest issue in our rural area. So we need to find a balance where we can implement the charges and where we can help and take a relief also on our farmer and our residents. So it was a challenge. The rural councillor worked very hard with the mayor's office and senior staffs and our colleagues at an urban and suburb councillor ward, because it's a city-wide issue. I know we are only looking from it from one perspective, but we need to look at it all as one big pot in the big city. So there is impact for everyone in the city of Ottawa, but moving forward, we're hoping that will eliminate a lots of issue, and we know where's our dollar directed. So we thank you very much for coming out today and hearing from
I do appreciate that explanation, and I'm starting to get a glimmer of understanding of how it works, and I understand that the budget is large and very complex, and I appreciate that explanation. And the one comment I would leave you with is I'm hoping that the mayor will refrain from saying that the urbans are doing the rurals a favor and not charging us. That doesn't help anybody.
I would prefer.
Thank you very much.
I would prefer urban councils just stop talking about real stuff altogether, but that's, that would be, I just want to, Councillor Blais mentioned something to me just now in when I was explaining the tax implication. It wouldn't be just the $2 million. It's the $42 million. So it's the full $42 million cost for stormwater citywide is what we're looking at funding. And 46 of that million will still be with people that pay water and sewer bills. The difference is we're taking it off we're taking off their sewer surcharge on their water bill, but the actual stormwater fee will still be on their water bill.
I understand.
Right, so
that.
we can just shift that. We can still collect the money from their water bill, but move it over to the tax from that. We don't have that ability for myself because I don't have a water bill. So it has to go somewhere. If we took the balance, which is $2 million, and put it on everyone's taxes, that means 90% of the city is paying twice, and then I'm paying just a small portion. There's a lot to it, and that's why it's difficult. But that's what it was. So if it was a $42 million shift from one side to another, then you're looking at a 3% tax increase citywide to cover it, and some residents would see a decrease in their water bill to offset that 5% tax increase because it's 3 plus 2. But we would get the full impact of the tax increase. So it would end up costing us more.
Because rural roads are paid out of the tax, the 2%.
That's right.
Whatever it
Yeah, out
happens
of
to
that, the
be.
budget that goes up 2%. Yeah. Anyways, we're going to have a chance to talk about this in 2 weeks at Environment.
Sure. It's also very important to know why we're here and how we got here. It's because this is another problem since amalgamation. And when the transition board decide and try to make the right decision, instead of they made the right decision back in 2001, they ignored the whole report, councillors at that time, and they push all the services because before, between Osgood, Rideau Colburn, and West Carleton, we all paid these fees. But all the charges went...
Out of the roads budget.
Yeah.
But some of it, instead of put it back, they put it back into the sewer. And that's where it's very important for us to have a clear vision why we're here today. And we're trying to fix it one and for all, so we don't have these saying the rural pay more or urban say more. So I just want to put it out for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shirley. Appreciate you coming out. Notices of motion. We have one notice of motion for Councillor Shantiri to deal with the renaming of Riddell Drive to Cameron Harvey Drive. Did you want to speak to that, or do you want to just deal with it next?
Just to put it in a little bit of context, Mr. Chair, is a young person in our community a few years ago, got killed on our road, and city has we need to change the Riddell Drive name. So I thought it'd be nice to have a commemorative naming. So I submit the naming to city staff. They've ended the name, and the name seems get clear to move forward. So this is as a notice of motion that Agricultural Affairs Committee recommend that Council approve that Riddell Drive be renamed Cameron Harvey Drive in honor of Cameron Harvey.
Thank you. So we'll it's a notice, so we'll deal with that at the next meeting of ERAC in November. Inquiries? Councillors already submitted one. Other business? None. Adjournment? Carried.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Our next meeting is Thursday, November 3rd, 2016, here. Thank you.